All right, Meiklejohn artists, we are going to go over what it is and how we do a wet on wet watercolor sky. Okay? Tools that you need water and a brush, make sure it's clean, and a set of watercolor paints. A sky can be a sunset, a sunrise. You're going to have maybe a lot of warm colored tones if you choose that. If you're doing a stormy sky, you're going to have a lot of blues and purples. A summer sky might be that turquoise blue where we leave a little white for clouds, right? So think about what kind of sky you want to portray with the colors we have, okay? All right, so anytime you do a wet on wet, this paper is pretty good. But anytime you do a wet on wet, your paper will kind of warp, which means it kind of rolls or starts to bend. A wet on wet is fast, and you have to give up some control. Some control goes to the watercolor paints. And I'll talk more about that giving up control in just a moment. All right, so your landscape should totally be done, totally filled in, totally done, right? This is the wet on wet is the final step. So step one is in a wet and wet is you take your wet paintbrush. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't wake up the paints I'm going to use. I'm going to go ahead and use a little of the blue, but I'm also going to get a little yellow. So I'm waking up my paints, adding a little water to them so when I'm ready to use them, they're ready to go because this is fast. You can already see the water I just put on. Is already soaked in like a sponge, okay? We want it to be shiny still. So I don't do the entire sky at once. I do like the bottom third and then do another third and then do another third because if I try to do it all at once, it's going to dry up and not work because the water has to be sitting on top in order for this to work, okay? So I'm going to start with some yellow and orange. And watch how the water does some of the work. Little red. You want to make sure when you're doing a wet on wet that you're choosing colors that are going to blend well together because they're going to blend on their own. The water is going to force them to kind of flow into each other. You guys see that? And that's what I mean about giving up control. If I continue to take my brush across here, I'm going to blend it all, but it's going to have no special effect. Okay, so I have to let it do its own thing. Now I'm going to do the next section. Remember, this is fast. This medium-sized brush is a good one to use. You don't want to use a tiny brush because that would take too long. I'm going to do a little bit more orange and yellow. Yeah, do you see how it's pulling? Now this leaves, and you want to make sure you go edge to edge. This leaves a little bit of white on places, so it kind of forms its own clouds. All right, this last little bit, I'm going to bring in some blue. And I want to make sure that water, I still see a shine on it. That's how I know it's sitting on top. Once that shine is gone, we've lost it. Oh yeah, look at that, you guys. Look at that. Giving up control. Now, if it's not doing that, it's because the water's already soaked in, right? And you can see why we need to choose colors that work well together. I'm going to try a little purple up there too. Just see what happens. If it seems too dry, did you see I just dipped my brush in the water again? Yeah. You can always do that, okay? Now, you have to be really careful carrying this to the drying rack. You have to carry it flat, like a pizza box, or else it's going to drip and run where you don't want it to. Okay? That's it. That is a wet on wet. You are now completed with your landscape. And now you can go on to when I'm done. if that's where if you have time for that. All right? All right. See you guys later.